Some silences are just deafening. Think about the silence in a home that should be filled with the laughter of children. But instead, there's just this unnerving, empty void. Or the silence of a phone that ought to ring but stays stubbornly quiet. And then, there's the kind of silence that screams of an unimaginable horror. A silence that blankets an entire community, heavy with grief and fear. In late May of 2025, that kind of silence fell over Oak Harbor, Washington. It was a silence soon to be shattered by sirens, and then replaced by another kind. The silence of a man, a father, who vanished into the wilderness, leaving behind a tragedy that would kick off one of the most intense manhunts in Washington state's recent memory. It all started with a mother's growing panic. A scheduled return, missed, calls unanswered. Then, a 911 call tore through the evening calm. By the time police made it to a remote campground, Travis Decker, a 39-year-old father, was gone. But he didn't just leave an empty space. He left behind a scene that would haunt investigators and an entire community, and a horrifying discovery that would flip a missing person case into a desperate hunt for a man accused of the unthinkable. May 30th, 2025. For Whitney Decker, it was supposed to be a routine day, or as routine as it gets when you're navigating the complexities of a fractured family. Her 3 young daughters, 9-year-old Peyton, 8-year-old Evelyn, and little 5-year-old Olivia, were with their father, Travis Decker, for a scheduled custody visit. The hours ticked by. The agreed-upon return time came and went. Whitney's calls to Travis went straight to voicemail. That knot of dread, so familiar to any parent in a similar spot, began to tighten. This wasn't just a case of someone running late. Court records would later paint a darker picture, revealing a history of escalating concerns. Whitney had separated from Travis years before, and co-parenting had been anything but easy. She'd voiced serious worries about his declining mental health and increasingly erratic behavior. Just back in September 2024, she'd asked the court to limit his visitation, citing neglect and the emotional distress it was causing their daughters. The court had listened, at least partly, reducing his custody time and saying no to overnight stays. Yet, supervised visitation was still granted, a decision that, looking back, hangs heavy with tragic irony. As the evening of May 30th dragged on, Whitney's anxiety mushroomed into full-blown alarm. This felt like more than just breaking a court order. A deep, primal fear for her children's safety grabbed hold. She alerted the authorities. The initial response led officers to a chilling discovery. Decker's truck, abandoned near the Rock Island campground in the vast, rugged terrain of Chelan County. Inside, they found blankets, car seats, food, and a wallet. But there was something else, something ominous. What looked like 2 bloody handprints on the tailgate. Of Travis Decker and his 3 little girls, though there was no immediate sign. It was as if the wilderness had swallowed them whole. The search kicked off immediately. A frantic race against the fading light and the intimidating expanse of the Okanagan-Wenatchee National Forest. For 2 agonizing days, law enforcement and search teams combed the area. Hope, already so fragile, dwindled with every passing hour. Then, on June 2nd, the worst fears anyone could imagine became reality. Not far from where Decker's truck was found, down a small embankment at a remote campsite, investigators made a devastating discovery. The bodies of Peyton, Evelyn, and Olivia Decker. The details that came out were horrific. The girls had been suffocated, their deaths officially ruled as homicides. Investigators found plastic bags and zip ties scattered around the campsite and inside Decker's abandoned truck. Evidence at the scene also included a man's blood, later confirmed to be Decker's. His dog was also found nearby and was turned over to the Humane Society. The idyllic beauty of the Washington wilderness was shattered, replaced by the grim reality of a triple homicide. The focus of the investigation shifted with brutal clarity. This was no longer a search for a missing father and his children. It was now a manhunt for a father accused of murdering them. Travis Decker was officially a fugitive. The once quiet peace of the Pacific Northwest was replaced by the urgent hum of a massive manhunt. What happened next was an incredible mobilization of law enforcement resources across Washington state, showing just how serious the crime was and how dangerous they believed this fugitive to be. Local, state, and federal agencies all came together, a united front against a common target. The Chelan and Kittitas County Sheriff's offices were the first boots on the ground, forming the initial backbone of the search. They were quickly joined by the Washington Army National Guard, bringing in helicopters and planes for surveillance, and giving them the ability to move people into remote, tough terrain. The U.S. Marshal Service, who specialize in tracking down fugitives, also jumped in, eventually taking a lead role as the hunt potentially crossed state lines, and maybe even international borders. The amount of technology and manpower thrown at this was immense. Drones buzzed through the skies, their cameras scanning the dense forests and rugged hillsides. K-9 units, noses to the ground, tried to pick up Decker's scent. A tough job in such a sprawling wilderness. Helicopters, including a government-owned UH-72A Lakota Eurocopter, crisscrossed the search areas, acting as eyes in the sky and ferrying tactical teams to strategic spots. Tactical teams, heavily armed and trained for high-risk situations, swept through rural and backcountry areas. The Washington State Patrol pitched in big time, flying more than 23 hours of air support in those first few weeks. The Kittitas County Sheriff's Office, having learned hard lessons from a similar manhunt in the same wilderness back in 2020, brought invaluable know-how in tracking suspects through such unforgiving land. They knew the communication challenges in these remote zones and the need for long-term planning when you're dealing with a fugitive who can live off-grid. Search and rescue teams, usually out looking for lost hikers, now found themselves hunting a man accused of an unspeakable crime. The search was relentless. A methodical grid-by-grid sweep, a sky full of surveillance, and the determined persistence of boots on the ground. Adding a chilling layer of difficulty to the manhunt was Travis Decker himself. This wasn't your average fugitive. Decker is a former soldier, an Army veteran, and a keen outdoorsman with extensive survival training. Investigators quickly figured out they weren't just chasing a man. They were chasing a ghost, someone uniquely equipped to melt into the very wilderness that defined the region. His skills were serious. He was reportedly good at covering long distances, navigating tough landscapes without modern tech, and living completely off the grid. There were stories that Decker had, in the past, lived off the land for over 2 months in remote areas, which really showed what he could do. He knew how to find shelter, get food and water, and dodge detection in ways most of us can only imagine. The Cascade Mountains and the surrounding forests, a huge challenge for searchers, could actually be a refuge for Decker. Authorities also knew Decker might try to change how he looked. He was described as 5 feet 8 inches and 190 pounds, with tattoos. They released images showing him with different hairstyles and facial hair, one with a shaved head and no facial hair, another with a shaved head and a thick mustache, and a third with shoulder-length hair under a baseball cap, trying to get ahead of any disguises he might use. His last known appearance was with long dark hair, possibly in a ponytail. Fueling more concerns that this was a calculated escape was evidence found on his digital devices. In the days before the tragedy, Decker had searched online about moving to Canada and potential jobs there. This didn't suggest a panicked flight, but maybe a pre-planned idea to head north. The spot where his daughter's bodies were found was chillingly significant in this light. Less than a dozen miles from the Pacific Crest Trail, a famous hiking route stretching from Mexico to Canada, offering a possible path to the border. This manhunt wasn't just a search. It was a race against Decker's skills and whatever head start he had. As the manhunt ramped up, a very real sense of unease spread across Washington. Statewide alerts blasted across TV screens and mobile phones, showing Decker's face and the chilling warning, "Armed and dangerous." The U.S. Marshal Service, showing just how serious this was, offered a hefty $20,000 reward for any information that would lead to his arrest. The impact on local communities, especially those near the search areas, was huge and immediate. Some towns went into lockdown, a jarring interruption to everyday life. Folks in remote areas, those living on the edges of the wilderness where Decker might try to hide, were urged to secure their homes, lock their doors and windows, and report anything suspicious. Property owners were asked to check their cabins, outbuildings, and any remote properties for signs of break-ins, and to look over footage from trail cameras and doorbell cameras. Despite the intense search and the armed and dangerous warning, officials tried to strike a difficult balance. They maintained that, based on what they knew, there wasn't a broader threat to public safety, suggesting Decker was more focused on escaping than on more violence against the public. But they always warned people to stay vigilant. The sight of helicopters overhead, the presence of tactical teams, and the constant news updates were a stark reminder that a man accused of an unthinkable crime was still out there, somewhere in the familiar, yet suddenly menacing, landscape. The Enchantment's Wilderness, a top hiking spot normally buzzing with outdoor lovers, had restricted access in some areas, though it later reopened with warnings for hikers to be careful. The Wenatchee community, where the girls had lived, was left to deal with immense grief, with the mayor talking about a town in desperate need of healing. A public memorial was planned for Peyton, Evelyn, and Olivia, a chance for the community to gather and mourn. These days, a manhunt doesn't just happen out in the field. It spills online too. As news of Travis Decker's alleged crimes and his disappearance spread, so did a flood of online speculation, theories, and, of course, misinformation. This digital fog created another challenge for investigators. A perfect example was a TikTok video that really took off. It falsely claimed that Decker had been arrested after a dramatic standoff, even showing images of Chelan County Sheriff Mike Morrison. Authorities had to quickly shut down this viral rumor, stressing that Decker was still at large and that this kind of misinformation just got in the way and confused people unnecessarily. Dispatchers at Rivercom, the local 911 center, faced a huge increase in calls, handling the pressure with real resilience. Behind the scenes, away from the glare of social media chatter, the painstaking work of processing evidence carried on. Detectives meticulously went through everything recovered from Decker's truck and the campsite. Forensic analysis of DNA and fingerprints was underway, a slow but vital process. Lab results were starting to give them important clues, though some findings also brought up new questions, details of which were often kept quiet to avoid messing up the ongoing investigation. Investigators reviewed data, likely from cell phone records and digital devices, and did countless follow-up interviews, chasing down every single lead, no matter how small. The U.S. Marshals Service, with its specialized teams, conducted its own interviews and assessments, adding their federal resources to the case. This was a war on multiple fronts: a ground search in dangerous terrain, an aerial watch, a digital battle against lies, and a careful forensic investigation. The public was urged to report any credible sightings or information, but to do it through official channels, not to just add to the online noise. The horrific events of late May and early June didn't just happen out of nowhere. As investigators looked closer at Travis Decker's life, a disturbing picture started to form, one filled with family problems, mental health issues, and rising tension. Court records and audio recordings, later made public, peeled back the layers of a deeply troubled family situation. Travis and Whitney Decker had been separated for years. The custody of their 3 daughters, Peyton, Evelyn, and Olivia, was always a source of conflict. Whitney had repeatedly expressed serious concerns about Travis's stability. In a petition to change their parenting plan filed in September 2024, she described him as becoming more and more unstable and detailed instances of neglect that she believed were causing their children significant emotional distress. There were allegations that he had forced the girls to sleep in an armory, which he denied, claiming he took them to safe, paid campsites. The court, clearly not entirely buying his explanations, responded by cutting back his custodial time and specifically banning overnight stays with the children. He was also cited for issues around homelessness and unpaid child support, which made the custody arrangements even more complicated. Courtroom audio captured Travis Decker's own voice, thick with frustration and a sense of helplessness over how little time he was allowed with his daughters. He pleaded for more visitation, apparently unable or unwilling to see why his behavior was a problem for his kids, or to acknowledge the concerns being raised. Even his own brother, Thomas Decker, also a soldier, reportedly said that Travis had grown distant, abandoned his family, and had shown signs of violence before they eventually cut ties. These warning signs, these cries for help from Whitney, and perhaps, in his own way, from Travis, were a tragic prelude to what would unfold. Despite the documented concerns and the court-ordered restrictions, supervised visitation was still allowed. It was during one such court-sanctioned visit that the unthinkable happened, a devastating end to a crisis that had been simmering for a long, long time. The system designed to protect had, in this case, left the children terribly vulnerable. The hunt for Travis Decker is a stark reminder of the tough situations law enforcement deals with and the incredible strength of communities shaken by tragedy. If you're finding this story compelling, think about subscribing for more in-depth true crime stories. And if you have any information, no matter how small it seems, that could relate to this case, please contact the U.S. Marshals Service or your local authorities immediately. Your tip really could be the one that makes all the difference. As of June 18, 2025, weeks have passed since the discovery that rocked Washington state. Travis Decker is still like a phantom, one of America's most wanted fugitives. The initial frenzy of the massive search has now settled into a determined, methodical, and relentless pursuit. Federal authorities, including the U.S. Marshals, are now leading the charge, using their nationwide network and specialized fugitive apprehension teams, like the elite Rapidly Advancing Manhunt RAM program. That $20,000 reward for information leading to his arrest still stands, a constant public plea for help. Search areas are still focused on the rugged, mountainous terrain of Chelan and Kittitas counties, including places like the Tenaway Valley, Blewett Pass, and the challenging Enchantments Wilderness. Flight tracking data has shown aircraft still circling specific zones, suggesting that intelligence, maybe tips or investigative leads, is guiding their movements. Authorities have admitted that Decker, with his survivalist skills, is a tough guy to catch. Sheriff Mike Morrison of Chelan County said, "We're dealing with a highly capable survivalist who may be using the terrain to his advantage. But law enforcement isn't giving up." Sheriff Morrison also sent a message that capture is inevitable. "There is nowhere that he's going to be able to go that we don't have units waiting for him. Washington State knows who he is. We're going to continue to be in there, and he's got a lot of ground to cover. Eventually, he's going to tire, and he is going to make a mistake." He added, "All we need is one mistake and one day to go in our favor, and he's going to be in our custody." Other officials echo this, believing Decker has to be perfect to stay free, while they only need him to slip up once. Tactical teams are still equipped with less lethal tools, ready for an encounter and hoping to bring him in unharmed if possible, though he's still considered dangerous. K-9 units are used strategically to track footprints and potential movements, not just sent out randomly. The psychological pressure on Decker, wherever he is, must be huge. He's a man alone, hunted, his face and alleged crimes known across the nation. The authorities have repeatedly urged him to surrender peacefully. The case of Travis Decker is far from over. It's heavy with unanswered questions that eat at investigators and the public. The biggest one, of course, is, where is Travis Decker now? How has he managed to stay one step ahead of such a massive, high-tech manhunt for this long? Is he still out there in Washington's wilderness? Or has he managed to get further away, maybe even across the Canadian border like his earlier internet searches hinted? Will his impressive survival skills and deep knowledge of the terrain let him dodge capture forever, becoming some kind of specter in the mountains? Or, as Sheriff Morrison believes, will he eventually make that mistake? What will be the key clue, the critical sighting, the one piece of information that finally leads to his arrest? These are the questions fueling the ongoing investigation. The emotional toll on the community, especially in Oak Harbor and Wenatchee, is immeasurable. The loss of Peyton, Evelyn, and Olivia is a raw, open wound. Mayor Mike Poirier of Wenatchee spoke of the global impact this tragedy has had on his small city of 35,000 and the deep need for healing. He highlighted how the community has reached out to the family and to each other, urging everyone to remember compassion in such a dark time. Whitney Decker, the girl's mother, has even started a fundraiser, hoping to create positive change beyond Wenatchee, focusing on broader societal improvements after her unimaginable loss. Free counseling services have also been made available for those affected by the tragedy. Authorities keep urging the public to stay vigilant. Every hiker, every person living in a remote area, everyone checking their security cameras could potentially have a piece of the puzzle. The message is crystal clear. If you see something, say something. Report any credible sightings or suspicious activity immediately to 911 or the U.S. Marshal Service. And do not approach him. The hunt for Travis Decker is about more than just chasing down a fugitive. It's a quest for answers, a demand for justice for 3 innocent lives cut tragically short. It shows the incredible dedication of law enforcement officers who brave harsh conditions and navigate incredibly complex investigations. It's a story of a community dealing with profound grief, yet somehow finding strength by sticking together. The peace of a Washington evening was shattered by a 911 call, and the ripples from that call are still spreading. The search for Travis Decker is a grim vigil, a stark reminder of the darkness that can exist, but also of the enduring hope that justice, no matter how delayed, will eventually win out. The investigators are determined. The community is watching. And somewhere, a father is still on the run. The question isn't if his luck will finally run out, but when. Thank you for joining us for this in-depth look at the ongoing manhunt for Travis Decker. True crime stories like these are often still developing, and we work hard to bring you the most comprehensive and respectful coverage. If you want to stay informed on this case and others, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Remember to share this information responsibly. Our thoughts remain with the families affected by this tragedy.